Africa, a vast continent home to more than 1.2 billion people. Most of them live in rural areas. The majority of the landmass is made up of dry lands, where limited water and land degradation barely allow people to scrape out a living with agriculture.
Africa is often portrayed as a continent of disasters. People talk about drought, famines, political instability. But this doomsday scenario is not portraying the real story. For me, Africa is a continent of opportunities.
The continent has areas that hold great promise. Fertile landscapes where water is available all year round. Wetlands cover some 140 million hectares of land in sub-Saharan Africa. There, water is available in the upper soil layer for extended periods throughout the year, and soils are richer and more fertile than those in adjacent uplands. These areas support a wide range of species. And allow farmers to grow food with high yields for most of the year. Could such wetlands become a food basket for Africa in the future? And how would a more intense cultivation of wetlands affect their important ecological functions? These questions are being addressed by a consortium of African and German academics working in several countries in East Africa.
It's evident that wetlands can improve the food security in most of the African countries. The question that we should ask before turning wetlands into the food basket is, what price are we ready to pay for the local population, for regional governments, to the extent to the global community?
Of course, using wetlands for agricultural production can have negative impacts on the ecosystems, and therefore we need a better understanding of their diversity and of the ecosystem services and functions they provide in order to minimize the trade-offs between agricultural use of wetlands and the other functions and services of wetlands.
First of all, we need science-based guidelines. We need computer simulation models, and we need decision tools for our policymakers, allowing them to decide which wetland, where and how to use in view of producing more food, meeting growing food challenges of the future, but at the same time responding to growing concerns for the environment.
Until the 1970s, most African wetlands were largely unused when it came to agricultural production. But throughout human history, they have provided water for drinking and washing, and have provided supplementary foodstuffs, in particular protein, by being sites for hunting, fishing, and gathering. The reeds that grow in them have been used as thatching material and for building houses. Wild plants with medicinal purposes have also been collected in wetlands. And during the dry season, nomadic herders used wetlands as grazing grounds and as watering spots for their animals.
Okay, the wetlands are quite important within an ecosystem. Well, the wetlands on a larger scale regulate water and sediment flow. Also within the locality, they alter the climate. Wetlands provide water for industrial and domestic uses, downstream of course. And then within the climate change debate, wetlands are very important because they sequester carbon dioxide and also sink carbon within the ecosystem.
The scientists working together on the Wetland Research Project recognized that wetlands are very diverse, and that the question of whether to use or to protect a wetland will require a more differentiated look at these ecosystems. In a first interdisciplinary survey, the team members characterized a large number of wetlands in Kenya, Uganda, Rwanda, and Tanzania. That allowed them to come up with a wetland typology. The primary differentiating factors were the wetland types, such as the upper reaches of the catchments, the inland valleys, the lower parts of the catchments, the floodplains. There are small peat bogs, and there are littoral areas along the lakes.
They all are different, and within these different wetlands we have also very different hydrological or use situations. There are the fringes, which may be drought-prone, where dry conditions may prevail. We have the center positions, which may be deeply flooded.
Together with political priorities in the different countries, this wetland typology guided the selection of study sites for the in-depth research activities of our students.
In our working group, as hydrologists, we look at the catchment-wetland interaction. So we try to understand the fluxes of water and nutrients from the surrounding slopes, so from the upland towards the wetland. And thereby we found that the land use of the upland has a big impact on what happens in the wetland. One option could be to rather protect the uplands so that we ensure enough sufficient water infiltration in the catchment so that we can ensure a sustainable water availability within the wetland.
Finally, the type and intensity of land use was determined by the physical accessibility of a wetland, along with its proximity to markets and other economic opportunities.
Wetlands have an enormous potential. The yield potential in wetlands is so high. However, the farmers are still working below this potential, way below. We find out that in the work that we have done in Uganda and in Tanzania for this matter, that simple management practices like banding, that is retaining soil longer in the plots, you are able to get yields of up to 3.5 tons. This is more than double what farmers are getting at the moment. We have used organic amendment. We have used cowpea, the post-green manures, we have used lab, and then we found out that the yields from these treatments are really good, and this is also sustainable for the wetland. It's not injuring the wetland. But the production, depending on the position that you are in the wetland, the yields differ. I think this is what we need to communicate to farmers, that once you're in the center position, this is what you do, and the fringe position, this is what you are meant to do.
Kilombero is very special, being a large floodplain, but provides a lot of services, provisioning services, as well as regulatory services. And being an international site, a Ramsar site, it has important conservation matters as a priority. But at the same time, we have migrants coming in, pastoralists utilizing the area, and there are a lot of conflicts that have been developing between the agriculturists and the pastoralists. And therefore, we thought it was important that we study this site to see how best we can tackle these issues of conflicts, but at the same time balance issues of conservation and production.
We know that the increased food production is very positive for the farmers, and we also see that the variety of food that is available for the farmers and the households is generally increasing. On the other hand, we know that during food production we are facing different disease risks, and farmers are exposed to malaria, to schistosomiasis, and to other water and sanitation related diseases. From this, we come up with the health impact assessment that considers that in wetlands we have different user groups which are exposed to different health risks, and the health sector needs to be on board when it comes to wetland management.
But what happens to wetland ecological functions when farmers drain the land and grow crops? Cropping is accelerating throughout the region, and this has an impact on the emission of trace gases.
We know that wetlands are emitting methane in a huge amount. For understanding how the agricultural intensification is influencing these trace gases, greenhouse gases, we are measuring at a number of sites the emission of trace gases, and then we can calculate the global warming potential. The ratio between methane and carbon dioxide and nitrous oxide is influenced by agricultural activities. So drying the soil increases carbon dioxide and reduces methane. And therefore, concerning the trace gas emission, agricultural intensification is not necessarily negative.
From measuring trace gas emissions to studying biodiversity and assessing economic gains associated with wetland uses, the Wetlands Project combines biophysical and human dimensions. The interdisciplinary research has yielded databases, alternative agricultural uses, and decision tools for policymakers.
Scientists use a completely different language than politicians. And it was important for us to make the results of our scientific research on wetlands relevant to policymakers in the environmental and agricultural institutions. And for that reason, we developed a decision tool which can be used by the politicians for developing their policies in the future.
The project was running for 5 years and provided us the opportunity to do research, to train a very large number of young African scientists, and to establish very interesting personal contacts to colleagues throughout the region. These contacts will be maintained even when the project is ending. And our results, I'm pretty sure, are going to change, maybe towards a wise use of wetlands in the future.
Wetlands will continue to be converted into sites for agricultural production and increasingly contribute to regional food security. The knowledge generated and tools developed by GlobE Wetlands will ensure that this intensification will be able to meet changing demands and that it occurs in harmony with nature.